When we think about conflict and fragility, or conflict and fragile situations, the main thing that we think about or should think about is how it affects people, how the lives of people are grossly impacted by conflict, whatever kind of conflict. And of course, other issues of fragility when governments crumble, or when you have also situations that can be natural in its causes. For us, though, when we talk about conflict and fragility, we should also look at it in the context of policy and government response. How do we make government response and international response beneficial for the people? How do we make sure that they are development effective? How are they impacted? How are they implemented through a human rights-based responses? So, on one hand, we want to understand the impact of conflict and fragile situations on the people. And on the other hand, how effective are the government projects and international responses for the people. And there, the question now of development cooperation, or ODA, and also the question of humanitarian aid. For us, the important thing is to start with the democratic interests or the human rights of the people, and to analyze the situation against the lens of democracy and human rights. On the other hand, when we lose the lens of human rights and democracy, we see, number one, many problems. Indeed, there will always be problems when you are dealing with governments or states that are facing conflict and fragility. But the question is, number one, are the states, these governments, or international agencies following human rights-based approaches? Number two, are they making sure the results of their action really have good impact or effective impact on the people? On the other hand, you can also see other tendencies or issues, such as the trends of militaristic responses to conflict, or militarism in relation to situations of fragility, which is very easy for states to go down to that level. Or on the other hand, you see also how problems of international agencies or foreign governments who are supposedly supporting the people in different countries, whether it is humanitarian aid, but also in the context of their militaristic policies. Meaning, when you have foreign powers that are peddling their militaristic solutions, and of course, the militaristic sale, which then impact negatively on development and the people. So, when we look at conflict and fragility as an issue of advocacy for a working group in CPDE, we are looking at how development cooperation is made effective on one hand, and how to prevent development cooperation from being destroyed by militarism, or the notion that foreign actors impart or dictate the the decisions made by the people and the governments in the countries of facing conflict. About development, you have to make sure that people are able to be secure in their lives. But on the other hand, the question of security that is in the context of the police and the military becomes problematic when it becomes implemented in that context and be called development assistance. Therefore, we have to be more assiduous, and we should be looking and study how the definition of aid is being conflated, or they bring in security and military assistance in the context of security. When we talk about Agenda 2030 as a comprehensive agenda for sustainable development, indeed the goal 16 for peace, and goal 17, which is partnerships, are important for CPDE to look at. Goal 16 talks about peace and development, and in that context, the issue of conflict and fragility is important. But on the other hand, when we talk about the goal of peace in Agenda 2030, we should be careful that we do not jump over the boundaries of what should be the agenda for peace and not fall into the trap of militarism. The objectives of CPDE in the Working Group on Conflict and Fragility is to improve donor coherence and mechanisms for a whole of society approach for conflict and fragility, giving primacy to the humanitarian and democratic interests of people living in situations of conflict and fragility. Strengthen and uphold the principles of inclusion and participation in peace-building processes, recognizing the role of national democratic actors, including civil society, in conflict prevention and resolution, and reconstruction. Indeed, when we look at the fact that there are more than 50 countries facing war and militaristic situations of conflict, indeed the issue of conflict and fragility is a very broad and urgent issue for development in the world today. But also, not to forget that it is about effective development that our government should be doing. There can be military aid, there can be humanitarian aid, but that is different from development assistance. And we should not mix the issue of militarism and military aid with development assistance.